3 American soldiers are dead, one of them just 19 years old, and the strike that killed them landed on a base most Americans have never heard of. In a country most people don't even realize hosts U.S. troops, and within hours, the Pentagon was already moving. This is the story of the attack on Muwafaq Salti Air Base, the 3 soldiers who didn't come home, and the American military response that's unfolding right now. Let's start with exactly what happened, because the facts here are confirmed across nearly a dozen major news organizations, and they paint a genuinely sobering picture. Now, on Friday, July 17th, Iranian ballistic missiles and drones struck Muwafaq Salti Air Base, a Jordanian military facility located in the Mafraq Governorate in northeastern Jordan, roughly 72 miles from the capital, Amman. According to U.S. Central Command, American service members stationed there were actively defending against that attack when the missiles and drones got through. According to reporting from CBS News, 3 American soldiers were killed. Private Isabella Gonzalez, just 19 years old from Carrollton, Texas, was killed in action on Friday. First Lieutenant Tyler James Feehan, 25 years old, from Iwa Beach, Hawaii, was killed the following day, Saturday. And Sergeant Angel S. Rampersad, 28, from Ozone Park, New York, was initially listed as missing in action before the Pentagon confirmed he was believed to have been killed as well, with formal identification pending confirmation through fingerprints, dental records, and DNA analysis by the Armed Forces Medical Examiner. Let's talk about what those last details actually mean, because they tell you something about just how violent and chaotic this specific strike actually was. According to reporting from NBC News, U.S. Central Command confirmed that military personnel recovered unidentified human remains at the site of the attack on Sunday, while still searching for the missing service member. The fact that formal identification required forensic analysis, rather than simply confirming a name through routine casualty reporting, tells you this wasn't some distant, clean missile strike. It was a direct hit on American personnel, violent enough that identifying the fallen required the most rigorous forensic methods available. According to Task and Purpose, 4 additional troops were injured in the same attack, though officials said by Saturday those service members had been discharged from the hospital in Jordan, with other personnel evaluated for minor injuries and returned to duty. That's a small piece of genuinely good news buried inside an otherwise devastating story, but it doesn't diminish the significance of what happened to Gonzalez, Feehan, and Rampersad. Let's talk about who these 3 people actually were, because it's genuinely important not to let names become abstract statistics in a story like this. According to CBS News, Feehan was assigned to the 2nd Battalion, 55th Air Defense Artillery Regiment, out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina. He was born and raised in Utah, but was living in Oahu when he joined the Hawaii Army National Guard in 2019 at just 18 years old. U.S. Representative Ed Case, who represents the Ewa Beach area where Feehan lived, spoke about him directly, saying that from a very early age, Feehan felt the need to serve his country and pursue that calling. According to PBS NewsHour, Feehan was posthumously promoted to the rank of captain and awarded the Bronze Star, the Purple Heart, and the Combat Action Badge. Gonzalez, according to multiple outlets, was assigned to the 1st Battalion, 57th Air Defense Artillery Regiment, out of Ansbach, Germany, the same unit as Rampersad. At 19 years old, she represents one of the youngest American casualties of this entire war. According to CBS News, friends remembered her publicly in the days following her death, describing the loss of someone who had barely begun her adult life before it was cut short defending a base most Americans will never be able to find on a map. All 3 soldiers, according to multiple reports including PBS and NBC News, were supporting Operation Inherent Resolve, the long-running American mission against ISIS in Iraq and Syria that's been active since 2014, years before this current war with Iran even began. That's a genuinely important detail, because it reveals something significant about how this conflict has expanded well beyond its original boundaries. These soldiers weren't necessarily deployed specifically for the war against Iran. They were part of a long-standing, separate counterterrorism mission. They still ended up directly in the path of Iranian missiles and drones, because American forces are, according to the Associated Press, arrayed across the entire Middle East, making other nations targets of Iran and its allies as the fighting has escalated. Let's talk about the broader significance of this specific attack within the overall arc of this war, because the timing here matters enormously. According to Fox News, this marked the first U.S. troop deaths since the ceasefire collapsed, and according to the Associated Press, these were the first American deaths from direct Iranian fire since the opening days of the war back in late February. Think about what that actually means. This wasn't simply another data point in a long, grinding series of casualties. It represented a genuine reopening of direct, lethal confrontation between American forces and Iranian weapons, after a period where the intensity of that specific kind of direct engagement had at least temporarily quieted down. And the cumulative toll from this broader conflict, once you add these 3 names to the count, becomes genuinely staggering. According to Fox News, this attack brought the total number of U.S. service members killed since the war began to 17, while more than 420 have been wounded. 420 wounded Americans, 17 dead. Numbers that, according to earlier reporting we've covered on this exact conflict, the Pentagon had at times been slow to fully and transparently disclose, with an earlier New York Times investigation revealing that the military had failed to report nearly 100 troop injuries in just a 2-week stretch before this specific attack even happened. Let's talk about how President Trump responded to these specific deaths, because his public statement reveals a lot about the administration's posture going forward. According to Fox News, Trump vowed that Iran will pay, in his own words, many times over for what happened at Muwafaq Salti. According to NBC News, Trump told reporters directly that these soldiers were, in his words, great patriots, out there fighting that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, framing their deaths explicitly within the broader justification he's used throughout this entire war, that military pressure on Iran is fundamentally about preventing a nuclear-armed Iran, regardless of the mounting human and financial cost required to pursue that specific goal. Now let's get to the part of this story that speaks most directly to the topic at hand, because the American response to this specific attack didn't wait. According to PBS NewsHour, the U.S. military launched new airstrikes specifically to punish Iran for the deaths of these American troops. A direct, immediate, and explicitly retaliatory military response tied specifically to what happened at Muwafaq Salti. This fits directly into the broader pattern we've documented throughout this entire war, a pattern where American strikes and Iranian counterstrikes have continued escalating in an increasingly rapid, tightly coupled cycle, each side's actions triggering an almost immediate response from the other. Let's put this specific attack into the context of the broader pattern of Iranian strikes against American positions scattered throughout the region, because Muwafaq Salti wasn't an isolated one-time incident. According to CBS News, 6 service members were killed in a separate Iranian attack on a base in Kuwait back in March. That same month, 6 additional service members were killed when a refueling plane crashed in Iraq, and 1 more American was killed in a separate Iranian strike on Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia. And according to earlier Fox News live coverage from that same general period, that specific Prince Sultan Air Base attack damaged several American refueling aircraft, including at least 1 KC-135 that was hit and caught fire, with 2 of the wounded troops reported to be in serious condition at the time. Think about the geographic sprawl represented across just these confirmed attacks. Jordan, Kuwait, Iraq, Saudi Arabia. This war, which began with strikes directly against Iran, has genuinely spread its lethal reach across multiple separate countries throughout the region, each one hosting American forces that have become, in effect, forward targets for Iranian retaliation, regardless of whether those specific countries are formally participating in the war against Iran themselves. Let's talk about the political pressure this specific attack and the broader casualty toll it represents has created for President Trump domestically. According to PBS NewsHour, Trump, despite framing this war as necessary to prevent a nuclear-armed Iran, now faces genuine political pressure to bring the conflict to a close, and to avoid exactly the kind of prolonged Middle East conflict that he had specifically campaigned against during his run for office. That's a genuinely significant tension sitting at the heart of this entire situation. A president who built part of his political identity around avoiding exactly this kind of extended, costly foreign military entanglement is now facing mounting American casualties, mounting financial costs already confirmed at over $37 billion, according to earlier congressional testimony from the defense secretary, and a war that shows no clear signs of reaching a natural, negotiated conclusion anytime soon. Let's also touch on a detail that adds an additional layer of tragedy to this specific period of the war. According to Task and Purpose, the fatal strike at Muwafaq Salti came just after the commander of Helicopter C Combat Squadron 5 had died in a separate helicopter crash in the Arabian Sea earlier that same month. That's yet another American service member lost in a completely separate incident within the same general window of time, adding to an already mounting toll of losses connected to this broader conflict, some coming directly from enemy fire, others from the simple, brutal mechanical and operational risks inherent in sustaining this level of military activity across such an enormous, complex theater of operations for so many consecutive months. Now, let's talk specifically about where America's response currently stands, because that's genuinely the most urgent, most immediate part of this entire story. According to Central Command's own confirmed pattern of behavior throughout this war, documented extensively across multiple prior rounds of escalation, American retaliatory strikes following Iranian attacks have consistently followed within days, sometimes even within hours, of the triggering incident. Given that PBS NewsHour has already confirmed new airstrikes were launched specifically to punish Iran for these exact troop deaths, and given Trump's own public vow that Iran will pay many times over, the trajectory here points unmistakably toward continued, and likely intensified American military action in direct response to what happened at Muwafaq Salti. Let's think about what that response might actually look like, based on the pattern established throughout the rest of this conflict. We've already documented, in earlier coverage of this exact war, that Trump had been receiving expanded military options, including potential strikes on civilian infrastructure and energy targets specifically. We've documented that Central Command had previously hit more than 300 targets across just 3 consecutive nights during earlier rounds of this exact retaliatory cycle. If that same pattern holds following the deaths of Gonzalez, Feehan, and Rampersad, the American response likely won't be a single symbolic strike. It's likely to represent another sustained multi-day campaign, following the same intensifying rhythm this war has settled into again and again throughout its recent phases. Let's also talk honestly about what this specific cycle reveals about the broader trajectory of this entire conflict, because it's genuinely difficult to see, based on everything documented across months of this war, a clear, obvious path toward de-escalation from where things currently stand. Every time a ceasefire has been negotiated, it's collapsed within days or weeks. Every time American forces suffer casualties, retaliatory strikes follow almost immediately. Every time those retaliatory strikes land, Iran's own military and political leadership has publicly promised further response rather than signaling any genuine willingness to step back. That's not a pattern suggesting this conflict is approaching any kind of natural resolution. It's a pattern suggesting an increasingly entrenched, self-sustaining cycle of violence, one where each new set of casualties, on either side, becomes the justification for the next round of strikes, which then produces the next set of casualties, which then justifies the round after that. So where does this leave things right now, as of the most recent information available? 3 American families are grieving the loss of Isabella Gonzalez, Tyler Feehan, and Angel Rampersad, 3 young service members who were defending a base in Jordan when Iranian missiles and drones broke through their defenses. The total American death toll from this war now stands at 17 confirmed fatalities, with more than 420 additional troops wounded throughout the course of this conflict. President Trump has publicly vowed retaliation, and according to PBS NewsHour's own reporting, that retaliation in the form of new American airstrikes specifically aimed at punishing Iran for these deaths is already underway. And the broader question hanging over this entire moment, whether this specific round of American strikes finally breaks this exhausting cycle of escalation, or whether it simply becomes the latest chapter in a war that keeps demonstrating attack after attack, ceasefire after collapsed ceasefire, just how difficult it's proven for either side to actually bring to a genuine, lasting close remains entirely unresolved. If this story raised as many questions for you as it did for me while putting it together, drop a comment below and let me know what you think happens next in this rapidly escalating cycle. Do you believe America's current response finally forces some kind of real de-escalation? Or do you think this simply becomes the next chapter in a war that keeps repeating the exact same pattern of attack and retaliation? I read every single comment, and I want to hear your honest take on this one. And if you found this breakdown valuable, share it with someone who needs to understand the real human cost behind every headline coming out of this war right now. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next update the moment new developments come out on this story. Because based on everything we just covered, America's response is happening right now in real time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.